what's up? Hello. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
And my name is Dyl, and guys, I finally saw Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis. As you know, Matt has been here giving you all the Megalopolis news all season long. He saw it all the way back at Cannes. He read the script. He's got so much to talk about, and now I can finally join in on the conversation. So before we really dive into our discussion here today, I guess, Matt, do you really want to talk about just reading the script and being prepared for this film before seeing it at its initial screenings at the Cannes Film Festival earlier this year?
Of course, yeah. I mean, Megalopolis, as you might know, this has been Francis Ford Coppola's dream project ever since the 1980s. I think he started it about 4 years after Apocalypse Now, and because of a series of financial flops that basically put him into a position where he needed to make what the studios wanted to make and couldn't make his passion projects, he has been putting this film off and off and off. And he was ready to go into production on the film in the early 2000s, and then 9/11 happened. And because of something that happens in the script involving a large destruction of part of New York City, it was not the right time to make Megalopolis, and it went back on the shelf. But now here we are, 23 years after 9/11, it's a different political climate, and he's finally made the movie. But is the movie as good as it once might have been? That is a big question. Does it live up to what the original script was? Is this the same Megalopolis that Francis Ford Coppola would have made back in the 1980s? I would say, no, it's not. I mean, the draft of the script that I read was over 180 pages long, so that it would have been well over 3 hours. And the film that we got is about 2 hours and 15 minutes. Quite a lot has been trimmed off of this thing. It is not the movie that Francis Ford Coppola once set out to make, but it is singular, it is different, and it is something. I don't know what to make of it. Now, Dylan, before we get into the synopsis and everything, you'd obviously heard from my Cannes reviews and everything that I hated Megalopolis. I was not a fan of this movie. Did that color your perception going in, or were you still really excited to see the film?
There's a few ways to really look about Megalopolis and me throughout this year, because if we go back to our first Oscar predictions that you and I did in person all the way up in Toronto, where you were predicting high things, I was timid but still had it kind of in the realm because it seemed so interesting on paper. My biggest drawback were some of the things that you were saying was his biggest positives of how he's had so much time to work on the movie. So much time has really switched from his original drafts to what's coming out now, and how he had full creative control to really make this project. And then we got the initial buzz from some of the sales screenings that weren't the best, you could say, and we were all like, oh, well, some studio has to pick this up because it's a Francis Ford Coppola movie. People want to have this film on their filmography at the end of the day and their distribution. And then we saw that no one would buy it, and he had to take pennies on the dollar for what he put in. And the movie went to Cannes, and almost everyone hated the film and trashed it and tarnished it. But I was still looking forward to it because sometimes I am the one who likes some of these bad movies. You go back to something like Bardo that may not have been this critically panned, but was something that a lot of people were talking up. A director having full creative control, a lot of money into it, some of even their own money, and then it just kind of is not very good. So I was looking forward to it. I will say before we dive into the synopsis, fun movie? No. Good movie? No. So bad that it's fun movie? Also no. And those are my least favorite types of movies.
Really? See, I would say that this is a fun movie. I laughed my ass off for most of it. I came out of it hating it, and I also came out of it feeling like I can't wait to see it again. I'm seeing it again on Friday. And that's despite me hating almost every second of it. Anyways, though, what is Megalopolis? This is a modern Roman epic set in a reimagined version of America. The city of New Rome. It's not New York City anymore, it's New Rome. This is a weird future. And in this New Rome, we see a society that's run by architects, by people who are The upper class, the celebrities of the world, are the architects who are building the city, and one of those is Caesar Catalina, played by Adam Driver. He's a genius artist in charge of all development around the city. Because of some past indiscretions and some tabloid news that has come out against him, a lot of people really don't like Caesar Catalina, including the city's mayor, Frank Cicero, and he remains committed to a regressive status quo. Unlike Caesar Catalina, Caesar is looking to a future that he can continue to build. He's looking to make New Rome into the greatest city in the world once again. But Frank Cicero, the mayor, wants to stick to how New Rome has always been. And between them is Julia Cicero, who is the daughter of the mayor, but is also falling in love with Caesar Catalina. She's divided in her loyalties, forcing her to kind of discover where her allegiances truly lie. Is she with the side of progress, or is she with the side of the status quo? And that's kind of what the film's about, but is it really about that? I don't know, Dylan. What do you think? Is it really about that?
I don't really think so. I know that you added a lot there to the synopsis, and I think your additions to the synopsis makes it sound a lot more interesting than what this film really is, because we talked about before, just diving into some initial thoughts. Coming into Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis, I wanted to call this an event. I wanted to say this film demanded to be seen on the biggest screen possible because I got to see it in IMAX, and regardless of your thoughts on the film, it was a must-see. But like I said before, that's not what I have to say. And what I have to say is not a lot of nice things. Francis Ford Coppola, he sold his iconic wine company for $110 million to fund this film. And ultimately, I think instead of adding to his iconic filmography, he is tarnishing it with something that is leaps and bounds one of the biggest messes of this year overall. This film is just so ripe with ideas of the future of our nation. It has so many things to say. Before this film started, there was a Q&A with Coppola himself, Spike Lee, and Robert De Niro, and they were talking about ideas for this film and each other, and it was kind of a mess, and this film feels like a parallel to that Q&A, just not in the way that most people would want their Q&As to parallel their actual film. And to me, it just shows how you can have this lifelong dream, but if you don't have anyone to keep you in wraps, it's not gonna come out the way you want. He had free reign, and I just don't understand how it is this dull. The visuals feel lifeless. Every scene looks like it's shot on a green screen and not in a very creative and special way. His eye with the lens, sometimes there's cool camera angles, but they just seem like, oh, let's just do one here. There's no real creative flair to it overall. And you said it, this film's about architecture. I don't see any cool architecture here. The production design is so bad for a film about this subject. And I mean, we talked about this in our early predictions. You said this had the most costumes of all time as one of the reports. And I would say mostly all these costumes really fail to impress. And I mean, I can keep going with my opening thoughts, but I want to hand it over to you before I just keep going deeper and deeper into my issues with this film. I know it's been a few months since you've seen it, but what were some of your initial thoughts walking out of that theater over the Cannes Film Festival?
Walking out of the Cannes Film Festival screening, my initial thoughts and what I wrote in my Letterboxd review, and what I think I said to Justin from the Oscar Expert, was this feels like what would happen if you gave $110 million not to Francis Ford Coppola, who is supposed to be one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. This is what it feels like if you would have given $110 million to someone like Neil Breen or Tommy Wiseau. It doesn't feel like one of the greatest minds to ever make film made this. It feels like someone who has never seen a movie before made this. It is incompetent on levels beyond understanding. Like, I can understand a movie being a misfire. I can understand putting together your $110 million project and having it look great, sound great, but just be unfiltered and a little bit messy. We've seen that many times. I mean, we've seen that as recently as, like, I don't know, Babylon. Babylon, I'd say, is a good movie. It's messy, but it's a good movie. And here, it doesn't feel like the people making it even know how to make a movie. And I don't fault the team for that. I fault it entirely on Francis Ford Coppola, because we heard through production reports that it was a very frequent thing that Coppola would get there on the day of a shoot, and he would look at the prep work that all of the departments had done and say, throw it all out. And he'd go into his trailer, and he'd get stoned, and he'd come back out and say, this is the new plan. And you can see, you can absolutely see the wasted money on screen. This movie does not look like a $100 million movie. It looks like, I don't know, maybe a $5 million movie where $95 million was thrown down the drain. Because you can tell that they got there and scrapped ideas on the day of. These sets that you were talking about, the architecture that doesn't look very nice. Absolutely not. Yeah, you're completely right. It looks like he saw the sets and went, can we change this? Let's change it for tomorrow. And the production designer had to just throw together something on a day's notice. The costumes, I would believe that it has the most costumes of all time because he probably scrapped most of them and had them start from scratch over and over and over. The lighting design looks terrible. I mean, we've seen green screen movies work. It doesn't here because it never looks like the lighting is right for what's on the green screen. They're always mismatched. You can tell exactly where the background starts and the performer ends simply because it's not lit right for these situations. It just is crazy to me how incompetent the film feels. And that was my biggest surprise watching it at Cannes. I expected a movie that was messy, but was made by Francis Ford Coppola. And I don't feel like I got that.
I guess my biggest surprise coming out of the screening the other day is I knew the film was a mess, but when you have a star-studded ensemble like this, with huge names, you expect them to at least, do what they're known for. But I feel like every actor in this film knew they were a part of a train wreck. Adam Driver's antics are just wacky, and it seems like he's phoning in every scene that he's in. Shia LaBeouf goes off the rails, and it kind of just feels like he's playing the Shia LaBeouf you see on the news. Aubrey Plaza's hamming up because she knows how awful her character's written. And Natalie Emmanuel, bless her, but she cannot do a Jersey accent to save her life. And she thought she was straight in a real Oscar-y movie type drama. And this movie was not that whatsoever. And just the rest of this cast just feels so lost. Like, the performances feel like they're straight out of a TV soap opera. And they're in such a weak script that's just absent from so much direction, like you're talking about, from a once great filmmaker. So it makes sense if he's changing all this stuff on the day of for everyone to kind of be clueless to what to do in their respective scenes. And this should have been Francis Ford Coppola's magnum opus, and instead it's a awful, horrendous, laughable mess. And he talked in the pre-show Q&A about how this was not a woke movie. He just wanted to start a conversation, and he wanted this film to leave a super long lasting impression like some of his iconic films in the past. He mentioned Apocalypse Now, which was hated. It was divisive at the time of its release, and now it's regarded as one of the best films of all time. And I'm happy to say I think Megalopolis will be remembered like Apocalypse Now, just not in the way that he may want, because you talked about The Room before, you talked about Neo Breen movies before. I think that's what Megalopolis will be remembered for. You don't watch it to indulge and learn. You're watching to laugh at it and to make fun of this film that should have been a hit, should have been a great thing, because we talked about Babylon, we talked about Bardo. Those films have their lovers, they've had their haters, but even people who hate the movie can still respect the ambition. This film has no ambition. It lacks style. It lacks flair. And while it has an interesting premise, it doesn't do anything with it. It's just so chaotic and not an enjoyable way. And it's just going to go down as one of 2024's biggest mess fires. And I think the film had a great quote. It's in the first 15 minutes of the film. And Aubrey Plaza says this. She says to Adam Driver, "Fuck your stupid Megalopolis." And that's kind of how I felt leaving the movie. And it's one I really wanted to like, and I just really am let down.
It's a film of wasted potential. It's really what it is. It is wasted potential all the way down. You mentioned the actors. I agree with you. I think this is an all-star cast that none of them are delivering at the level that we expect from them. I mean, Aubrey Plaza knows what movie she's in. She's not good, but she knows what movie she's in. Shia LaBeouf knows what movie he's in. But everyone else I feel like they're completely unaware of what they should be doing. And it feels like there's a lack of guidance. It feels all over the place like there's a lack of guidance, like there's no commander steering the ship. And what happened to Francis Ford Coppola to do that? I don't know. Like, where did he go? That's incredibly disappointing to me. And also, to speak from the perspective of having read the 1980s script, I thought it was great. I thought that script had so much potential, and there were a lot of ideas in there that had me thinking about it for days and days. I talked about this in my previous video, that Megalopolis, I saw it to be a film about the idea of how do you evaluate someone's contribution to society when they're revealed to not be a good person. You know, how do you reckon with an artist who is imperfect? And that was such a fascinating idea. And a lot of those moments remain here. For example, we still see the scene where Grace VanderWaal, who plays a 15-year-old, is revealed to be having sex with Caesar Cataline, played by Adam Driver, a full-grown adult man, which is a weird scene. But what that did in the script was it brought up these questions, and we had so much more talk of people saying, wow, Caesar is a terrible person, but he makes amazing buildings. That was all over the script. I don't think that's in the movie. You know, that happens in the movie, and they brush over it. They show it on the billboard, and people are like, oh no, oh my goodness, and then they never talk about it again.
I mean, I think it goes one step further, as they show it in the very next scene before anyone can even really have a discussion around it. They're like, oh no, she's actually 25. She's just pretending to be a 15-year-old. Here's the birth certificate. And like, one of my big issues with the film, and it goes back to the production design, it also goes into just this character of Caesar. We hear about how great he is. We never see him do anything. We see him blow up a building. We never see him make a building. We see him reconstruct his face, but that's not him. That's his item that he uses. It's the megalon, or whatever they call it inside the film. We never see him actually create this utopia until we have this weird, awkward, giant time jump. It's like, oh wait, it's done now, guys. Let's go see it. And that just goes to the rest of my issues with this film. It just feels aimless with its plot. There's so many weird time jumps. There's just long chunks of voiceovers from Adam Driver, or the the narration from Lawrence Fishburne that's just reading what you can physically see with your own eyes, but it's Lawrence Fishburne, so he has to, yes, awful font, and he's reading it so slow, like you can read it yourself 5 times before he finishes it once. And I don't know, the cast phoned it in. The production design is just not there. Those are my issues. I kind of mentioned them all before. Do you have any more issues you want to talk about, or should we talk about some of the few positives with Megalopolis?
I have so many issues. I could be here all day, but it all just comes back to the wasted potential. Like I was saying, you know, they have so many scenes that set up very interesting ideas, and they never go into them. Like you were saying there with the Grace VanderWaal scene, they write it out immediately, and that all that happens in the script too. You know, they end up saying she's 25, but we see more fallout first. We see more things happen, and it feels like the difference that happened between Coppola writing it in the 1980s and filming it in the 2020s is that in the 1980s, I think he was much more reflective of his own flaws as a person. And I think he was thinking a lot more about how will my work be viewed when people don't think I'm a good man. And I think we can even see this in the press tour of this film and all of the negative things that have come out around Francis Ford Coppola in advance of this, right? Where, you know, he was kissing extras on set. Gross, nasty. But that is almost interesting to look at what he's worked on in relation to that, because the film, at least the script he wrote in the 80s, was very much about how do you reconcile someone being not a perfect person with being a great artist. That's not what the movie's about. And it's because it feels like he turned Caesar into a god character, right? He does no wrong. He can do no wrong. Anytime something bad comes out about Caesar, the next scene goes, actually, that was wrong. That was false information. That was fake news. He's perfect. And it feels like both versions of the script are a self-insert for Francis Ford Coppola. But in the 1980s, I think he was much more self-conscious. I think he was much more aware of his flaws. And in the modern day, I think he views himself as a god. And that is the issue with this movie. I don't think he has the introspection in 2024 to reckon with the fact that he is not perfect.
And I think that's very much echoed in the Q&A that was before, because anytime a question happened, I was talking with one of the members in our community, and I was even typing, like, he's talking like Trump, just without the politics, about how he's great, everything's about him, how things always go better even when they look wrong. He's like, well, this movie may have flopped, but it got good ratings, it sold well at the box office, blah, blah, blah. And then the just topic of politics came up. And then I just feel like all their answers were just more interesting and more compelling about the topic that Coppola was saying this film is about, that they said in the Q&A, than what the film itself actually had to say. And I guess to get the film a few positives, Coppola does have some interesting ideas. They just aren't very well executed. Like the live immersive element that's actually like 8 seconds long is a cool idea if you actually do something with it. I know originally they were trying to work with Amazon to do some AI tracking, so like you could ask a question and Adam Driver would have like a fake voiceover or something to give an actual answer. I know that didn't come to fruition. And then there's like so many things in this film I can understand where it was trying to do. It just does nothing with it, like Matt has said a few times here already. And the rest of the positives I have are kind of spoilers. So if you do care about spoilers, skip ahead. Time codes are down the description. But there are some actual LOL moments in this movie. We talked about last year, the best sex scene of the year was Napoleon. Megalopolis is winning this year with Aubrey Plaza and Shia LaBeouf's character, sex scene on the table of barking and biting each other and everything like that. I wrote in my notes, bone R arrow. That probably is one of my favorite jokes in this film. It got a great laugh out of me as well as a lot of people around me. The costumes overall aren't very impressive, but there are some that do look pretty good. And I would say the hair and makeup in this film is also pretty impressive, even though that's something that I feel like gets kind of overshadowed. It's kind of, I feel like it's two camps. You can either do hair and makeup really well or really bad. It's kind of hard to have like average hair and makeup. And I feel like here it's pretty good.
It's pretty good. It's not amazing. It's not bad work. Yeah, to the point that I've said before, I don't think that the head of departments on this are at all responsible for what went wrong with their work. I think the production design of this film could have been really good if it wasn't for Coppola constantly throwing shit out. I feel like the costumes could have been great if it wasn't for Coppola constantly throwing shit out. And like you said, there's a lot of things about this movie that are really funny. And while I might not have liked the movie, I was entertained. I was absolutely entertained by it. You know, it made me laugh a lot. I don't think I've ever laughed harder at a film festival than I did seeing Grace VanderWaal descending from the top of Madison Square Garden on a moon with 4 clones around her as she played the ukulele and sang about how important it is to keep your virginity. Incredible. That's cinema. That's cinema. That's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And it's full of moments like that. And a filmmaker that is a little bit more self-aware, maybe. A filmmaker that was intending to go for the camp a little bit more. I know that there are some people out there saying that Francis Ford Coppola was absolutely intending for this movie to be as silly as it is. I don't agree. I don't believe so. I very much don't think that he knows that this film is as silly as it is, because everything that I feel is that this is a film that he believes is a capital G great film, that this is a masterpiece that's going to be remembered as a masterpiece. But there's moments in it that I think would be perfect for a filmmaker that doesn't take themselves so seriously. And the reason that I dislike it isn't because I didn't enjoy it. it's because it misses the mark so far from what you can tell Francis Ford Coppola wants to do. He wants to change the world with this movie, and he put out something dumb and silly and harmless but fun. It's just not the movie he wanted to make. But again, I had fun. I'm seeing it again on Friday, so I can't wait.
It's just like, and I guess to dive into our ratings of the film, the biggest issue with Megalopolis is what we've been saying with this whole episode is it has these ideas, it has these concepts, it presents them inside the film and then just never returns to them. These can be big, pivotal plot points or just little things that would just help make this world and these characters a little bit richer. As I said at the very beginning of this episode, I was very much anticipating this film because even if I had heard this was a mess, it was a train wreck, as I was still hoping for it to be a fun mess, a fun train wreck. And while I did laugh at some points, I did cringe at others. They were never ones I probably should have been laughing or cringing. And at the end of the day, I was more bored and more disappointed and more just like I'm ready to leave than I was enjoying it. So I'm gonna have to give this a strong 2, a light 3, which for me is pretty bad.
I think that this is a film that had potential 40 years ago. And with every passing year, I feel like Coppola got further and further from his original vision of the movie. This is a film that is not what Coppola originally intended back in the 1980s. And it's not bad for artists to change over time, but it is bad when artists refuse to grow as the times change and as they change. And to me, this is the work of delusion. This is the work of an artist who is stuck with an ideal of what they once wanted to do rather than growing towards what they are doing now. It is one of the biggest messes of the year, and for anyone that was excited for Megalopolis because they wanted to return to the Francis Ford Coppola that made The Godfather, made Apocalypse Now, fortunately for you, you can just see The Brutalist instead. And that's why I'm going to give Megalopolis a 3 out of 10. It's not a good one. Not going to recommend it, but I am going to recommend seeing what Brady Corbet did.
Well, Brady Corbet, Brutalist, is probably going to get some Oscar nominations at the beginning of the year. We had that film of 0 because we didn't really know about it, but we did know about Megalopolis. I wish I would have gone back to pull what our original nominations tallies were for this film, but at this point, we both probably, I can probably speak for ourselves, have it for 0.
Yeah, fuck no. Absolutely not. But what I will say is that at the beginning of the year, my whole premise for why I was pitching this as an Oscar movie, I kept saying things along the lines of, Megalopolis is going to be a Best Picture player because people are craving that return to 70s style cinema. People want to see someone make something like The Godfather. They want to support someone making a film like New Hollywood. And I stand by that point. But Megalopolis just wasn't that film. Megalopolis is closer to The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl than it is to Apocalypse Now. It's closer to Fateful Findings by Neil Breen than it is to The Godfather. And so all of the things that I felt about Megalopolis at the beginning of the year, it's how I feel about The Brutalist now. And so I would say my initial premise of what Megalopolis's Oscar prospects were, I don't think that was wrong. I just think I had the wrong movie.
That's very fair, but we've reached the end of our review here. So everyone out there, let us know what your thoughts were on Megalopolis if you've seen it yet. And if you haven't seen it, what are you still doing here? Maybe don't go out and watch Megalopolis, but go watch something.
Save your money for The Brutalist in 70mm.
Boom, there you go. But until next time, my name's Dyl.
And my name's Matt, and this has been Fantasy Filmball.